Hi, welcome back. This is part 2 of the Developer Tools videos. In the first part, we looked at inspecting elements so that we could see what HTML and CSS was applied to those particular elements. And we also looked at changing and modifying the CSS attributes and values so that we could preview changes in the browser before we decided to permanently make changes in the code editor. In the second part, we're going to look at all of the magnificent things that Developer Tools can help us with when we're building page layouts. So there's no need to actually change anything in your code. I've just created a hypothetical situation here where we have a problem occurring in our layout. So you can see this is just the index page from our exercise, and I've gone in and I've purposely broken something here. And we're going to use Developer Tools to help us solve this issue. So the main issue here is that this section here called the Artist Corner is supposed to be floating to the left, and this Company News section here is supposed to be floating to the right, and these guys are supposed to be side by side. And you can see here that even though it appears as if the Company News section has enough space to fit up side by side with this other section, for some reason it's getting pushed down below. So first thing I'm going to do is right-click and inspect one of the elements that's giving me a problem. And here I right-clicked on the figure, which is the box that's surrounding the video element and the figure caption. And you'll notice if you look at the bottom of the developer panel here, there's actually a breadcrumb that shows you the relationship of which elements are nested inside of other elements. So for example, we're on figure. If I click, I can see that figure is actually inside of section with a class of column2 left, and that's inside of a div with a class of wrapper, and so on and so forth. So if I go over this section here with the class of column2 left, I can see that Chrome is actually giving me color coding to indicate the padding and also the margin. So in this case, Chrome uses a light green color to indicate the padding inside of the element, and it uses a light blue color to indicate the content area inside of that element, and it uses a light orange color to indicate margin. So in this case, you can see that there's actually quite a bit of margin on the side of the element, and that's probably the culprit as to why the other section, the news section, is not able to fit up side by side with this Artist Corner section. So if I select the element there, as we know, we can see all of the CSS styles that are affecting that particular element. And if I come down here to margin, we can see that the culprit here is that the right margin is set to 20%. Now, aside from being able to click and change the values here, we also have another panel that we can open up to see more information about this particular box model for this element. So I'm going to collapse the Styles panel here by clicking this little down arrow. And underneath that, you can see there's another panel titled Metrics, and we're going to expand the Metrics panel. And that's going to reveal the box model for this particular element. You can see if I hover inside the center, I'm able to see the content area, and in fact it's even giving me the exact amount of pixels, width, and height for the available content area inside this element. And if I hover inside of the next section of the box here, this one that's called padding, we can see that there's actually 20 pixels of padding on each side. And we can see that there's no border, and that there is a 20 pixel margin on the bottom, and that 20% margin on the right actually ends up being 192 pixels. One of the nice things about being able to see the box model is you can see very clearly how much space or how much screen real estate each element is actually taking up, and that's important when you're trying to build column structures. Additionally, we can also double-click to change these values. So I can type in another value here, or I can also use the up and down arrows to change the amount of margin in this case. So I'm just going to hold the down arrow and bring the margin in until I see that there's enough space for the other column to fit side by side with this one. There we are. So here it looks like around 9 pixels is about as much margin as I can have here in order for the news section to fit side by side. Additionally, aside from putting in pixel values, we can also put in percent values as well. So for example, if I set this guy to 5%, I can see that that doesn't work. If I set it to 4%, I can see that's still not quite enough. If I set it to 3%, 2%. So by typing in the percent symbol instead of pixels, it'll actually do the conversion for me. And again, if I type in 1%, we can see that that works. So 1% of space inside of this wrapper, which is 960 pixels, comes out to 9 pixels of space. So now that I know that 1% is my magic number, I can see that I'm going to have to change this 20% here to 1%, which is on line 206 of the style.css style sheet. So if I come back over to my code and I come down here to line 206, I can see this is the class column to left, and here's the margin of 20%. I can reset that to 1%, save, and we can come back and refresh the page, and we've corrected that error. So you can see developer tools can be very useful for troubleshooting the widths, padding, and margins, borders of the box model, as well as enabling you to see all of the CSS positioning commands.